So I want to talk today about, I'm going to kick off with these four big truths that we've been running into. And this is something that really became apparent to myself and the rest of the team as we were traveling around the world talking about SharePoint Embedded earlier this year. And, number one is that AI is the fastest growing technology that, we've all seen in our lifetimes. Sure, a lot of it started back in the 50s, but, if you think about the last couple of years, it's been pretty crazy about how fast it's been growing. And one of the things that really strikes people when you start talking about AI is the evolution, of course, right? And so, the AIs that you're using today are definitely not the same as the AIs that you were even using 6 months ago. So this is just, kind of the reality that we're living in. But the second part of that is, as you're working on building your custom apps and agents, they're all going to have a huge AI component. Agents, that's obvious for, but a lot of times people are still thinking about apps. And if you think about 2 years ago, you could have put together a reasonable proposal for an app that didn't have a strong AI component, but that's just not true today. Today, pretty much everything that you're building is going to have AI as a core part of it. And what we see as we talk to enterprises is that documents are really the secret sauce for these AI apps. Humans love creating documents. I think everybody here on the call is well aware of how many documents get created every day, every month, every year in their organization. We put all of our knowledge into them, and in order for an AI to really add value, it has to have access. And then the last thing that's become super clear is that an integrated platform with AI built right in is going to be your fastest path to value when you're building one of these custom apps or agents. And that's really where SharePoint Embedded comes in. So if you haven't heard of SharePoint Embedded before, the way that you should think of it is that it's an API-only version of SharePoint, specifically for AI apps and agents that use documents. And this is true for both enterprise, line of business apps, and ISV apps. It delivers a whole bunch of features that really make these apps and agents sing. So these are things like Microsoft 365 Copilot, Office collaboration, Purview compliance, and it does this for every app, and it does it as an Azure service. So it is important to note that this is an Azure service. It's not part of an M365 entitlement. I'm going to show you a bunch of QR codes through here, but I'll paste them in the chat here a little bit later on as well so that everybody has these. But this Start SPE, this takes you over to the Learn documentation for SharePoint Embedded. And we, on the product team, we've made a huge effort to make sure that this is actually very useful documentation. And so it is the best way to get started. But if you have questions on it, I'm going to show you an email later on too that you can send to, and we'd be happy to have your feedback or your questions. Now, when we talk about M365 features that SharePoint Embedded delivers, it really delivers the whole gamut. And you're going to hear me talk a lot about different numbers in this presentation today. I call this the 4 C's because everything starts with a C, and I like alliteration. But the one that people usually come to us with first, if they have an app that is working with files and documents, is collaboration. Because you know that all of your users are used to collaborating with docs the way that you can in SharePoint Online, right? Well, if you're building a custom app and you're not storing documents in the SharePoint platform someplace, collaboration gets very cumbersome. Usually it's some variation of the, hey, I got to download a document, I got to then work with the document, and then I got to re-upload the document. And that just isn't the modern workflow that people are used to. And with SharePoint Embedded, for your custom apps, you can now have this one-click native collaboration capability that your users are used to. So for example, if you have customers or users who are used to using the web client or the desktop client for Word, Excel, or PowerPoint, both those are supported out of the box. And I'm going to show you that here in just a minute. You also get full co-authoring, live presence, app mentions, sharing, and then of course preview for popular file types, things like PDFs. It's actually more than 300 file types, and so I can't list all the extensions that you can do, but it's PDFs, movies, images, all of that kind of stuff, all the way to specialty images like DICOM you can preview, and you can also preview things like the CAD CAM drawings. It's really pretty interesting. And then of course, if we start at the beginning here and we talk about Copilot, documents that come into the SharePoint platform, they come in and they all go through the same path, right? They all get semantically indexed, they get lexically indexed, and then they get the ACL applied on top, right? So that they're secure. And so when you're storing documents inside SharePoint Embedded, they go through this exact same process. Now, of course, if you have a strong compliance footprint, which most of our customers around the world do, keeping things inside your Microsoft 365 tenant inside SharePoint Embedded just makes sense because you get all those same compliance features. You can do things like e-discovery and auditing, data loss prevention, bring your own key, et cetera, et cetera. All of those apply to content which is stored inside SharePoint Embedded. And then, of course, if we round things out with the core storage over here on the right-hand side, there's just a bunch of features that you get when you're storing documents as part of SharePoint Online. And SharePoint Embedded makes sure that you get those same features, those business continuity promises, the search and discoverability capability. You get all of that as part of SharePoint Embedded as well. Okay. So here's the big question that people have always asked me, and I have never shown this slide before now. So you are the first audience to actually see this. And I'm excited to be able to show it, and I look forward to your feedback on it. But these are the patterns that we're starting to see as we talk to customers and they start to successfully adopt SharePoint Embedded over time. And so pattern number one is document management for large SaaS apps. So now this is not replacing all document management. This tends to be very specific document management for a particular use case within that app. So we've seen this with Dynamics, ServiceNow, Salesforce, some clinical lab testing apps, all of that. And what happens is they take a particular use case and they say, you know what, for this use case, we want all of these documents to actually be stored inside a SharePoint Embedded file storage container. I'm going to show you what that is in just a second. But the basic reason for this is really twofold. Number one, we have a very easy to manage security posture. If you're using one of these large SaaS apps and you're using Entra as an SSO, which a lot of people are, then you can easily mirror that over to the security settings for your file storage containers. Plus, because you can have a lot of file storage containers, it's very easy to segment these documents by business entity, whether that's an account, a case, or something else. So you have a huge flexibility when you are implementing SharePoint Embedded and tying it to one of these large SaaS apps if that's the right use case for you. Now, a second common usage pattern that we're starting to see emerge is this curation of gold standard documents specifically for RAG and agent usage. And so this is obviously an AI-focused use case. The whole idea is how do you curate the vast majority of documents down into a representative few that really represent the IP of your company, right? And this makes it very easy to integrate with the Retrieval API and the Azure AI Foundry. Now, don't worry, if you haven't heard of the Retrieval API, I'm going to be showing you here in just a second. And we have a section later on Azure AI Foundry as well, so stay tuned for that. Now, this is great for agreements. It's great for new document generation. It's great for translation, all of that kind of good stuff. So this is a common use case that we're starting to see. And then the last one that I want to call out is when you have sort of the specialty line of business or ISV app integration. And so you have this existing app, but you want to add a document experience to it, right? Without necessarily going down kind of an infinite development roadmap. And that's something which SharePoint Embedded makes easy because we're just an API, right? So you can integrate us into any app that's out there. You know, the most popular feature ask we get here is that collaboration. That's what I started off with when I was talking about your Microsoft 365 capabilities that SharePoint Embedded delivers. And the fact of the matter is that users around the world, especially when you're dealing in the M365 ecosystem, you have a certain baseline understanding of how to work with docs, and it's all built around what you can do with SharePoint Online. And SharePoint Embedded lets you easily bring that into whatever one of these specialty apps that you're working with. And now the magic here, of course, is that documents are always in the M365 compliance boundary. And so they're easy to interact with Copilot, search, purview, et cetera. And so those are really the three common usage patterns that we're going to come out in a second. Now, I'm going to go in and I'm going to show you a demo, but after the demo, I'm going to answer that other core question that I get, which is SharePoint Online versus SharePoint Embedded. How do you know when to do which one? Preview, spoiler alert, it depends is the answer. And I'm sure everybody on the phone is used to seeing that from their work in technology over the years. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at a demo app. And so you should see on my screen now, a demo app is just introducing SharePoint Embedded. I'm going to go ahead and sign in with Microsoft. And so I've already cached the password and I've already cached the MFA, so you're not going to have to watch me go through all of that pain. But what it does now is it actually just loads up an SPE demo app. Now, don't worry too much about the app in this case, right? Because the app is just whatever the app is. This could be, some type of SaaS app. This could be some type of line of business app that is particular to your business. But what I do want to focus on is I want to focus on documents. So when I go into documents, the first thing you're going to see is this collection of file storage containers. Now, because SharePoint Embedded is an API-only product, I'm going to show you this thing called the API Explorer. Now, this API Explorer is something I actually had GitHub Copilot agent help me vibe code this whole app. So everything you're seeing here, I didn't write all the code for it. I harnessed, our good friends over at the AI coding assistants to do that. But this API Explorer shows how we get this list of containers. And so you can see there's a standard graph API call up here at the top. There's some headers that you send over. This should look very familiar to anybody who's ever worked with API calls. And then the response is very straightforward, right? You get this block of data back. And this is essentially our drive names, and it's our drive IDs. And so if you're used to already working with drive IDs and drive items and drive item IDs, you're going to be very comfortable in the SharePoint embedded area because it uses the exact same things. Now, I want to point out, because I know we're on a call which is not only about M365, it's also about Power Platform. We actually do have a really fun Power Platform adapter, which we're in the process of getting ready for preview. And so I can't show you it today, but we're going to be on in, I think it's in a month, Besa, if I remember right. And we're going to aim for showing it then. But don't worry, we've got both audiences taken care of, from pro code to, I don't know that I necessarily like calling Power Platform low code, but that's kind of what I call it. So anyway, that whole range, our mission is to really support that. But for right now, this is what the APIs actually look like, right? So I'm going to go ahead and close this. And what you can see now is we start to have, these very discrete file storage containers that are very lightweight. Now, I say that you can have many of these. What is many, right? Many of these, when we talk to customers, ranges from a few thousand to a few million. We have one customer who says, I want 12 million file storage containers. And so far at the engineering level, we have said that is all fine. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to focus on this economic history. And I want to show you this permissions first. So when you're doing permissions, this is a custom way of working with permissions. All I'm doing is working with the API, and I'm creating my own user experience for it. Because remember, this is my app now. This is not SharePoint Online or something else. And so again, if I go into API Explorer, you'll see where I can get permissions, and I can set permissions as well. And this is now going to be kind of old hat, so I'm not going to show you a ton of these. But you get the idea, right? You create the request, you get the response, and then the user experience is up to you, the developer. It's up to you, the business, to figure out how you want this to actually work. So I'll go back to containers. And now what I want to do is I'm going to open up economic history. And I want to take a look at some of the documents, right? So you'll see that we just have a bunch of documents here. And there's magic in the way that this works. Remember, I was talking about that one-click collaboration. I'm going to go ahead and click on this automotive history. And you'll see that it brings this up, right? And I'm going to say, hello, Microsoft 365 community. Right. So you can see that I actually do this demo quite a bit, because there's hello world and this is a demo, hello Microsoft 365 community. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and close that now. And remember, this is just the regular Word web client. This is nothing special, right? I mean, Word is special, but I'm saying that we didn't do anything new for this, right? So I'm going to go ahead and close that. And then when I open it back up, you're going to see that it's now gone ahead and it's, of course, saved everything in real time. And if we go through the various file types that are here, you'll see that we can do the same thing for PowerPoints. And I have a very boring PowerPoint presentation here, very straightforward. But of course, we can do the same thing with everything. Now, there's lots of different ways that you might store data in here. But all of this data, all of these documents have a collection of things that you can do. So for example, I could download it, or I could rename it. I could work with metadata. I could look at the versions. I could download as a PDF, delete or share. I'm going to go ahead and delete it. Are you sure you want to delete it? You bet I am. Okay, so that's pretty good. But oh no, maybe I didn't want to delete it. So if I click on more, look, I have the recycle bin right here. And I can go ahead and look at this and I can say, yeah, I actually want to restore that, right? And so it takes just a second, but now automobile industry is back. So when you think about what SharePoint Embedded gives you, it really does give you all of the features that you would want for document management within any app that's going to work with documents. This is my "but wait, there's more" statement. So I'm going to open up this chat window over here. And this is actually a custom SharePoint Embedded agent. And I can start working with this. And this is now scoped to my economic history, and it's a standard agent that you can work with. It's using regular Copilot stuff. So I'm going to say something like, hey, show me info about banks, right? Because I happen to know there's some bank information in here. But you can do lots of fun stuff in this. So the other day I was playing around because somebody was like, oh, look, we have this whole custom thing for translating. And I was like, well, wait a second. I think I can just do translations right here in the SPE agent. And it works great, right? It's actually super fun to do. You can say, hey, translate this to Japanese or translate from Japanese to English or whatever language you really want to. But you get the idea, right? So you now have this custom agentic experience, which is available to whatever custom app you're building, which is pretty cool. Okay, so we'll get out of this. And I want to show you a search real fast. And because I'm already talking about banks and there was a Chicago reference in there, I'll just search for Chicago. And you can see that this is coming through just fine. So I'll go ahead and click on search. And when I do, it gives me my search results. And so ABN AMRO bought First Chicago. And so here we have ABN AMRO, a decade by decade history, which is pretty cool. And then, of course, I promised you I would show you the Retrieval API. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here. I'm going to select the container to scope my query to. And I'm going to say, tell me about Chicago, right? Now, this is all designed for back-end code integration because it's a specific API, right? And so when I hit execute query, it's going to go out and it's going to get this relevant hits. It's going to show the web URL. And then it's going to do extracts, right? And so you can see this is starting to give us extracts of various presentations that are in here, right? So usually it'll give you one to many, but then it also gives you this relevance score. So if you're out there building a custom agent of some kind, the Retrieval API is a great way to get in and actually work with this. Now, the Retrieval API right now is in preview, so there is some things that you have to do if you want to get access to it. But it is super cool when you think about how you might go ahead and build some of these agents and apps on top of SharePoint Embedded. Okay. There's a ton of stuff I could show you that kind of scratches the surface, but I'm going to go and go back now to the presentation so that we can finish off with a couple of really important points. And let's see, we already went through this one, so you get to see that again. Congratulations. Oh yeah, I want to talk about Copilot 6 ways. I didn't show all of these in here because of limited time, but I like to talk. You know how I said there was a lot of numbers? Like there's, 4 C's, and then there's the 3 use cases. Now we're going to talk about Copilot 6 ways. And so there's the M365 Copilot chat. If you configure it so that you can access SPE containers, which is it's a developer feature, you can do that. The in-app Copilot chat in Word, Excel, or PowerPoint works great. The SharePoint Embedded Custom Agent, that's what I showed you. The Retrieval API, I showed you that. Azure AI Foundry, that works today, and there's some roadmap items on it, so stay tuned there. And then, of course, Copilot Studio, which is a little bit more roadmap, as there's a couple of things that have to happen. But so SharePoint Embedded really does help you integrate with this entire platform. If you're talking about the fastest path to value for a custom app and agent, SharePoint Embedded gives you a path there. But let's talk about the big question, which is, when do you know that SharePoint Embedded is the right choice instead of SharePoint Online? And so there's really 4 signals out there that I look at. Number one, I look at this architectural thing called separation of concerns. So if you're out there building an intensive app that's mission critical, you have to decide how you're going to host that app and where you're going to put it. It's really interesting because SharePoint Online is such a flexible platform, you can often put it there, but you have to make a choice of, is that what you want to do? If you have a large, critical, intense app, maybe you want your storage segmented outside of SharePoint Online, right? Likewise, you might want to have segmented billing, right? And so the fact that SharePoint Embedded is an Azure service, it gives you that capability. Now, the second thing is you might have need to store a whole bunch of different types of data, and you might really want these file storage containers instead of document libraries. Document libraries are great, but file storage containers are lightweight, fast. They're designed to be instantiated in code in real time. And it still stores data inside that M365 tenant, even if it's partitioned outside of SPO. And the idea is that you're modeling your business on that. Remember how I was talking about they can attach to any one of these business objects? SharePoint Embedded is really designed to handle that. Now, this one is really interesting because each of these containers has 0 access by default. There's no permissions by default, right? Your app gets to assign everything. And last but not least, when you want to have this custom user experience. Now, I know we're almost at time here, so I'm going to finish out pretty quick on a couple of other slides, but don't worry, I think we shared this deck in here somehow so you can take a look at it. We've got some great customer feedback from M-Files and M-Files customers. We just announced a partnership with them. They're replatforming to use SharePoint Embedded as a storage for all of their customers with their document management app. And a lot of questions that I get is this, how do you try SharePoint Embedded? We make it very easy and frankly free to try SharePoint Embedded. And so there's an end-to-end video right here that shows you how to do this with what we call a trial container type, right? VS Code extension walks you through it, super fun. And then I'm going to end on this slide right here, and I'll go ahead and come off camera. Vesa, I know we're about ready to switch over, but these are a bunch of links. I'll go ahead and put these into the chat and answer any questions that people posted in there. But I want to make sure everybody sees this SharePoint Embedded at Microsoft.com. That is an email that goes out to kind of the whole team. And so if you have a core question about, is it applicable? Do you want, do you have, how do you handle this situation? Send us an email. We'll definitely get back to you. We look forward to your feedback.